Ashley Mims, and I am here to explain to y'all about the digestive tract. I have a partner named Andres Paredes who will be here later on in the video. Okay, so for the digestive tract, just to kind of give you some background information, first you're going to start with the digestive tract of the oral cavity, which is located right here towards the mouth. Now, in the oral cavity, what we have are salivary glands, which are presented right here with these whitish colored clay, and that's kind of what produces your spit, and that's also what helps like break down your starchy foods such as like potatoes into simple sugars. And that enzyme that does that is actually called salivary amylase. Also, you have a hard palate, which is located at the roof of your mouth. You may know it by holding in your roots of your teeth. And also that's what you can like press whenever you have a brain freeze. And there's also a soft palate, which is located towards the back of your mouth that helps push food down. So you use your teeth and your tongue in order to chew, and it ends up making a bolus, which is like a clump of chewed food with kind of saliva over it. It's kind of a little bit gross, but then that will be going down your esophagus. Also in the oral cavity, there is a structure called the epiglottis, which helps separate your trachea and your esophagus. So basically it helps keep you from choking or sending food down the wrong pipe. Once the bolus goes down the esophagus, how it goes down the esophagus is because of the peristaltic movement, which is the contraction of the muscles. And then it will go into the stomach, where the enzyme pepsin will then break down the protein into peptides. And after digestion takes place in the stomach, the bolus will then turn into chyme, which is later transported into the small intestine.
So after food is partly digested in the stomach in the form of chyme, it'll pass from the stomach through the duodenum, and that is the shortest part of the small intestine, where it'll then pass into the jejunum, which is this upper part of the intestine. And what happens here is we have bile and pancreatic enzymes, which are going to help break down this food even further, and all of this is happening right here. And food will pass down to the ileum, which is the lower portion of the small intestine, and all through this, inside of the small intestine are these little finger-like objects that come in these folds called cilia. And these cilia, which are located all inside of the small intestine, will help food be absorbed into the bloodstream. And that's where we get the absorption of our 3 shuns of digestion. So after food is fully broken down in the ileum, it'll pass into the large intestine, which is this red, long, large strand of clay. And here in the large intestine is one of the last processes of the digestive system. You're going to see here the final absorption of water and vitamins, so that you have excretion occurring here at the end of the body. So the large intestine is partly absorption because we're getting the absorption of water, but then closer to the back of the body, we see excretion, the last shun of the digestive system. So also, the large intestine, while it absorbs water and vitamins, it'll also absorb salts, and this fully digested and absorbed food will become feces, so it can pass into the rectum, and the rectum is primarily for excretion, which is, again, the last shun of digestion. So next we have the pancreas, the liver, and the gallbladder. And these are all accessory organs of the digestive tract. They're called accessory organs because no food is actually passing through them. We just have them aiding with the process of digestion. So first we have the pancreas, and it's this little yellow crescent-shaped object under the stomach. And the pancreas is going to release enzymes which will break down food, and these enzymes are going to break down fats, sugars, and protein. So next, we have the liver, and the liver is important because it's secreting bile, and it produces it. And this bile will help break down lipids or fats. Now, a lot of this bile is stored here in the gallbladder, this little blue globe object, and the gallbladder will connect to the digestive system by the way of the bile duct, and it will release bile into the small intestine so it can help digest lipids faster. And one last thing, these accessory organs are helping with the process of digestion, which is one of our 3 shuns of the process of the digestive tract. So again, digestion.
Since you'll kind of have more background information about the digestive system now let's try to put this more in action. For instance, if you're eating a french fry and you take a bite of your french fry, you will start to chew and use your teeth and your tongue in order to break down the starches and fats that are located in the french fry because of the potatoes that french fries are made with. And this is known as mechanical digestion. Now, whenever salivary amylase, which is an enzyme located in your saliva, comes in contact with the food, it starts to break down the carbohydrates that are in the french fries. And once the food is kind of chewed, that little ball of chewed food is known as a bolus. It's kind of gross, but it's called a bolus. And then once that bolus kind of starts to form, because of the epiglottis, it will move down your esophagus. Now, in order to move down the esophagus, there's a movement called peristaltic movement, which I mentioned earlier in the video, but that is whenever the muscles contract, causing the food to move downward. Also, there's no really digestion taking place in the esophagus, but the digestive enzymes that kind of started working before you swallowed the food can still be working now. Whenever the bolus reaches the stomach kind of does the brute work for mushing up all of the food into smaller pieces. Now, the stomach produces pepsin, which is an enzyme that breaks down the protein found in french fries. Although you may know there's not a lot of protein found in french fries because you may hear your parents say, like, hey, don't eat french fries just as a meal because it's not very healthy. That's because their french fries aren't very healthy and they don't have a lot of protein. But the small amount of protein that they do have, the enzyme pepsin is what breaks that down. Now, after this food breaks down, it then turns into a liquidy substance called chyme. And then the chyme will then be pushed out of the stomach into the small intestine by peristaltic movement of the stomach. So whenever your chyme gets to the small intestine, you kind of have to pay attention to the 2 substances that are mainly here. There are carbs and there's fats, and each one is broken down a different way. So first I'll explain about carb digestion, and this happens kind of in the first part of the small intestine called the duodenum. And the pancreas releases pancreatic amylase in order to break down those complex carb bonds found in french fries. And this basically means that the carbs will be transferred into glucose, and glucose is basically sugar. And because of this, the sugar levels will rise in your body, which stimulates the pancreas to release the hormone insulin. And what insulin does is it allows for all the cells in your body to take up more sugar. And after this process gets a little bit more lengthy, it eventually allows your body to make energy for you. For fat digestion, fat is broken down by an enzyme called pancreatic lipase. And after the fats are broken down, the liver secretes bile salts, which form kind of like a protective circle around these fats, which are then transported to cells. And this occurs in the second and third parts of the small intestine called the jejunum and the ileum. And that's kind of where those fats are taken up. And eventually with this process, your body will create energy. In the small intestine, it's covered with these kind of really tiny bumps called villi. And those villi are what allow the small intestine to absorb food easier. Now, these villi contain blood vessels, which allows for the absorption of nutrients, and it also allows for those nutrients to be transported all around the body. Also, because of the structure of the villi, it actually increases the surface area of the small intestine, which makes it easier for food to be absorbed faster. Since all of the nutrients were not absorbed into the small intestine, the remainder moved to the large intestine. Now, the large intestine, it contains these bacteria that kind of eat up all of the material that passes by. And these bacteria also benefit the body because it creates vitamins. Now, in the large intestine, there's two substances that are kind of here, and that is undigested food and water. And the water ends up being absorbed into the bloodstream while the undigested food is eliminated. The remaining material is brought from the large intestine to the rectum, which is where it is compressed into a solid form, and finally it leaves the body through the muscular anus. And that, my friends, is how French fries are digested.
So here we have our bite of the sweet potato, and those are the little sweet potatoes made out of clay. So if you're ever confused at any part of this video, rewind it, and here's an overview of the tract, just in case. So digestion first starts in the oral cavity, that's the mouth, and amylase, which is a little enzyme helper, those are helpers, they're gonna break down that sugar. There's so much sugar in these sweet potato fries, so we need a lot of amylase to break down this sugar. And so chewing is also going to happen using the teeth, and one of the shuns, digestion, will happen here. Food is then going to pass into the stomach, and stomach acid is going to break down that sugar even more, and churning will also happen so that more of that breaking down happens. And it's crazy to think we have acid in ourselves, but we do, and it helps breaking down that food so much. Pepsin will be kind of important, but not as much as all that amylase because there's not a lot of protein. Digestion will happen in the stomach. Then food will pass into the small intestine, and absorption is going to happen here. And villi will help, the little finger thingies in the small intestine, they're going to help with absorption. And maltase is another of those little helpers, enzymes, that break down maltose. And maltose is a fancy word for sugar. And maltose is going to be broken down into glucose. And this glucose is then used in our bodies. And it's absorbed using those little finger-like projections, those villi. And that's going to absorb the glucose. So pancreatic amylase is really major in this process of breaking down the French fry, or the sweet potato fry, sorry, because there's so much sugar in these sweet potato fries, so much starch. Starch is so abundant in these fries that we need a lot of amylase to break down the sugar. Trypsin and lipase are not as important, but it's important to mention them. Amylase is crazy important. And once all of this glucose and sugar is absorbed into the body, it moves into the large intestine where water is absorbed and vitamins are absorbed as well. But whatever isn't absorbed into the large intestine, and absorption happens in the large intestine, will be excreted in the rectum. And so there you have it, digestion of a sweet potato fry from the mouth all the way to the rectum with everything in between, and now you know how it happens.